Have you ever felt like the days just keep piling up, one after another, and you're not sure you'll make it to the next one? The soft blue of dawn creeps through the thin curtains of a high-rise apartment in downtown Toronto, casting gentle lines across the kitchen floor. Priya Malhotra stands barefoot before the counter, her hands moving automatically, a dance she knows by heart. The kettle hisses, a pan sizzles with cumin and onions. A small voice calls out from the hallway, and her phone vibrates insistently on the edge of the table, flashing with unread messages in both English and Hindi. Priya's breath fogs the cool window as she glances outside. Toronto is just waking up. A delivery truck rumbles down the street, headlights reflecting off puddles from last night's rain. A bundled-up jogger hurries by, air shimmering with her breath. The city, alive and indifferent, pulses beyond the glass. Inside, though, the world feels much smaller. A tidy kitchen, a cluttered dining table, a 4-year-old's toys scattered underfoot. She wipes her hands on her apron and checks the time. 6:11 a.m. Already, she's behind. Arav, her son, appears in the doorway, hair wild and eyes bright. "Mama, I want paratha," he declares, climbing onto a chair and drumming the table with his palms. Priya smiles, ruffling his hair. "Just a minute, sweetheart." Breakfast is almost ready. She moves like clockwork, frying, stirring, packing Rajiv's lunch in a Tupperware, all while keeping an eye on Arav, who has now started singing loudly to his stuffed elephant. The kitchen smells of ghee and coriander, familiar but tinged with something less tangible. Homesickness, perhaps, or longing. Behind her, the sink is stacked with last night's dishes, and the phone continues to buzz with reminders. Call Mom, grocery pickup at 10, reply to Nina. As Priya wipes the counter, her mind flickers back to Mumbai. Back then, mornings meant hurried commutes, office chatter, and fast food breakfasts at her desk. She was Priya Singh, senior marketing specialist, juggling deadlines and campaigns. Now, in a city that feels both thrilling and overwhelming, she is Priya Malhotra, homemaker, mother, wife. Sometimes she wonders if she's vanished into her new roles, her old self fading like a watermark beneath everyday demands. A door creaks open. Rajiv steps out of the bedroom, laptop in hand, tie already knotted, hair still damp from a rushed shower. He offers Priya a tired smile and scoops up his coffee. "Morning," he says, pecking her cheek. "Sorry, I've got an early call. Did you see my charger?" Priya points to the living room, where a tangle of devices lies next to the sofa. Rajiv is already distracted, checking emails on his phone, one foot in the kitchen, the other in the world of IT consulting clients and project deadlines. His presence is reassuring, but fleeting, always half elsewhere, as if he exists in 2 time zones at once. She plates the paratha for Arav, who beams and begins tearing it apart with sticky fingers. Rajiv grabs his lunch, waves a quick goodbye, and disappears into the small study that doubles as his home office. The door clicks shut. Silence settles, broken only by Arav's chatter and the distant hum of traffic. Priya sits for a moment, sipping chai, her gaze drifting to the family photo on the wall. Her, Rajiv, and Arav at the Toronto waterfront, bundled in winter jackets, smiling despite the biting wind. She remembers the excitement of moving here, the promise of new beginnings, the sacrifices that seemed worth it, her career on hold, her family's expectations, her own ambitions quietly shelved. The apartment is neat but modest, white walls adorned with a few framed prints, a couch softened by wear, plants on every windowsill. The kitchen is her command center, the place where she feels most in control, but also most confined. Outside, the city beckons with its endless possibilities, but inside, her world revolves around routines, meals, school runs, laundry, cleaning, repeating. Arav finishes his breakfast and races to the window. "Look, Mama, snow!" he shouts, pressing his nose to the glass. Tiny flakes have begun to drift down, dusting the rooftops and sidewalks below. "Can we go outside later?" he begs, eyes wide with hope. Priya nods, already calculating the day ahead. Laundry to fold, groceries to buy, a phone call with her mother-in-law scheduled for noon. She feels the familiar tug of exhaustion, the sense that she is always running a race where the finish line keeps moving. Her phone buzzes again. This time, it's a message from Nina Chowdhury, her neighbor down the hall. "Hey Priya, there's a local mothers group meeting at the park today at 11. Wanna come? Arav can play with the other kids. Let me know." Priya hesitates. Nina is warm, funny, always ready with advice or a plate of homemade samosas. They bonded over shared stories of South Asian childhoods, of adjusting to Canadian winters and missing home. But the thought of joining a group of mothers, strangers, most likely more confident, more settled, fills Priya with unease. What would she say? Would they judge her accent, her clothes, her uncertainty? Would she feel even more invisible, lost in a sea of friendly faces? She types a quick reply. "Thanks, I'll think about it," and sets the phone aside. Her reflection in the window looks tired, the circles under her eyes darker than she remembers. She fights the urge to sink into the couch and let the day slip away. Instead, she gathers up the breakfast dishes and starts the water running. Arav has already moved on to his coloring books, humming to himself. The apartment grows warmer as the radiator clanks to life, but a chill lingers inside Priya, a mix of anxiety and longing she can't quite name. From the kitchen, she hears laughter in the hallway, Nina and her son, Sammy, heading out for a walk. Downstairs, Mrs. Evelyn Carter is watering the plants in the lobby, as she does every morning, nodding a polite greeting to each neighbor who passes. Priya sometimes envies Mrs. Carter's calm, her settled rhythm in the building, the way she seems to belong so effortlessly. The day stretches before Priya, a blank canvas both hopeful and daunting. She knows she should reach out, accept Nina's invitation, step outside her comfort zone, find a way to reclaim a part of herself she's lost. But for now, the weight of invisible labor, the endless, thankless tasks that keep a home running, presses down on her shoulders. She wonders if anyone else feels it, this quiet struggle behind closed doors. Arav tugs her sleeve. "Mama, will you play with me?" he asks, holding up a crayon. Priya kneels beside him, forcing a smile. "Of course, Beta," she says softly, tracing shapes on the paper as the city blurs beyond the window. Outside, Toronto pulses with life. Streetcars clanging, horns blaring, people hustling through the cold. Inside, Priya fights a different battle. Loneliness, self-doubt, and the relentless expectation to do it all. As the morning light brightens, her phone buzzes once more, a reminder of the world waiting outside these four walls. What would you do if you felt trapped in your own home? Comment below if you've ever felt overwhelmed by daily life. The morning sunlight had barely warmed the city when Priya tried to coax herself out of her routine. She'd spent the first hours, as always, tending to Arav, his breakfast, his little shoes, his endless questions about the streetcars below. Rajiv had disappeared into his home office after a rushed goodbye, already lost to conference calls. The apartment, so full of small noises, felt somehow empty. Today, Priya had promised herself, things would be different. Nina's invitation to the mothers' group, the message blinking on her phone all week, had lingered in her mind. Maybe, if she went, she'd feel a little less invisible. Maybe she'd find a part of herself she thought she'd left behind in Mumbai. But as she tried to get ready, everything seemed to conspire against her. Arav, usually content with his toys, refused to put on his jacket. He wanted the orange shoes, not the blue ones. He wanted to watch cartoons, not go meet aunties. He clung to her leg, his protest escalating from a whimper to a wail. Priya's patience, stretched thin, snapped. "Arav, please, we're already late," she pleaded, her own voice sounding unfamiliar. From the other room, Rajiv's voice drifted in, muffled by his closed office door. "Priya, can you keep him quiet? I have a client call." There was no offer of help, just a gentle, distracted admonition. Priya's hands trembled as she zipped Arav's jacket and scooped him up, grabbing her own purse and a half-finished mug of chai. By the time they reached the elevator, her heart hammered in her chest, and her resolve felt as fragile as the winter sunlight outside. The mothers' group met in the community center, a bright, echoing room with colorful mats and a faint scent of coffee. When Priya arrived, she was nearly half an hour late. The circle of mothers, some chatting in easy English, others switching between Mandarin, Spanish, and Farsi, barely glanced up. Nina caught Priya's eye and waved her over, her smile warm but tinged with concern. "There you are. We saved you a spot," Nina said, making space beside her. Arav hid behind Priya's legs, peering at the other children through his fingers. Priya slid into the group, but the conversation felt like a fast-moving current, impossible to join. The other mothers swapped stories about daycare waiting lists and their favorite local bakeries. When Priya introduced herself, her accent tripped her up, her words coming out softer than she intended. One mother, a tall woman with sleek hair, asked, "So, what do you do?" It was a simple question, but Priya felt her cheeks burn. I stay at home with my son, she managed. Her old life, marketing plans, presentations, office chatter, felt like a distant memory, a language she no longer spoke. Arav fidgeted at her side, tugging at her sleeve. He wanted to play, but the toys in the center of the room were already claimed by other children. He whined, and Priya bent low, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed herself. Nina leaned in, her voice gentle. It gets easier, I promise. The first time is always awkward. But Priya only half heard her. She watched the other mothers, confident, laughing, swapping phone numbers, and felt a fresh wave of loneliness. Even in a room full of people, she was adrift. After the meeting, Priya gathered her things quickly, murmuring a goodbye to Nina. Outside, the cold stung her cheeks as she hurried home, Arav's small hand clutching hers. Back in the apartment, Rajiv was finishing another call. He glanced up as she entered, his expression brightening. Hey, you made it! How was it? Priya hesitated, searching for words. It was okay. Rajiv smiled, oblivious to the weight in her voice. Good. See? I told you, you just need to get out more. Try to relax, you're doing great. She wanted to believe him, but his words landed wrong. Try to relax. As if it were that simple. As if she hadn't spent the entire morning fighting just to leave the apartment. She retreated to the kitchen, the only place that felt like hers. While Arav colored at the table, Priya washed dishes, her thoughts swirling with everything left unsaid. Later that afternoon, as she sorted laundry in the building's basement, she ran into Mrs. Carter. The older woman, always clad in a cardigan and sensible shoes, greeted her with a gentle smile. Long day? Mrs. Carter asked, folding a stack of towels. Priya sighed. Every day feels long lately. Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes kind. When my children were young, I remember thinking the hours would never end. And then suddenly, they did. You're doing more than you realize, dear. Priya blinked, surprised by the unexpected comfort. She managed a small smile. Thank you. They rode the elevator up together, Mrs. Carter humming softly as she pressed the button for her floor. Priya watched her go, feeling, for the first time in days, just a little less alone. That evening, with Arav finally asleep and the city lights flickering outside, Priya called Nina. She needed to hear a friendly voice. Nina answered on the second ring, her tone warm. How are you holding up? Priya hesitated, then let the truth spill out. I feel invisible sometimes, like I'm just drifting from one chore to the next. I used to be somebody. Now, I don't even know if I matter. There was a pause. And then Nina spoke, quiet but firm. You do matter. You're raising a whole person, Priya. That takes strength. The rest, finding yourself again, will come. Priya closed her eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter. Nina's words lingered, a small anchor in the storm of her thoughts. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. Giving up your career? Some days, yes. But most days I remember why I did it. And I try to build something new, even if it's just for myself. They talked until Priya's tea went cold, trading stories, some sad, some hopeful, about the lives they'd left behind and the new ones they were still learning to build. As she hung up, Priya felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe tomorrow would be a little easier. Maybe with help, she could survive the days that felt impossible. If you've ever felt invisible or struggled to find yourself amidst the noise of daily life, you're not alone. Priya's journey is just beginning, and there's so much more to come. If you'd like to follow her story and hear more real-life journeys like hers, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you have your own daily survival tips, please share them in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, Priya took a deep breath, bracing herself for tomorrow. One small act of courage at a time. The wind battered the windows of Priya's apartment, the sky outside a relentless gray. She stood at the kitchen sink, sleeves damp, staring at a cracked mug floating in soapy water. It was only 9:30 a.m., but her muscles already ached with exhaustion. Arav's chatter echoed from the living room, punctuated by the clatter of toy cars colliding. A pan of dal bubbled over on the stove, hissing as it met the burner's flame. She snapped back into motion, turning off the heat just as Rajiv's voice drifted in from behind his closed office door. A muffled but urgent, "1 second, I'll send the files now." Priya closed her eyes. The morning had started like most others. Arav refusing breakfast, Rajiv late for a call, her phone lighting up with reminders. Laundry, groceries, renewal of her PR card. But today, a heaviness pressed down on her chest, a sense that something fundamental had come loose inside her. She tried to shake it off. There was too much to do. Lunches to prep, emails to answer. She had started volunteering remotely for a small local nonprofit, hoping to reclaim a piece of her old self. But even that felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the endless list of invisible chores. She wiped her hands and moved to the living room. Arav had constructed a fort from sofa cushions and demanded, "Mama, play!" His cheeks were flushed, eyes wide with expectation. "Just 5 minutes, Beta," she said, managing a smile. He pouted. "You always say 5 minutes. You never play." The words stung. She knelt beside him, guilt prickling her skin. "I'm sorry, darling. Let's play now." They built towers, knocked them down, rebuilt them. Priya forced herself to be present, laughing when Arav giggled, but her mind kept drifting. She checked the time again and again. She remembered Nina's text. The mothers' group was meeting at the park in an hour. Her heart sank. The last time she went, she'd felt invisible, hovering at the edge of conversations about swimming lessons and birthday parties. She had nodded and smiled, clutching her coffee like a lifeline, but every word seemed to highlight what she wasn't. Canadian enough, confident enough, accomplished enough. Arav tugged her sleeve. "Can we go out, Mama? Please?" Priya hesitated. The thought of dressing Arav, getting herself ready, and walking into that group again made her stomach twist. But she saw the hope in his eyes and nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll go." It took nearly an hour to wrangle Arav into his jacket and boots. He wanted his red scarf, not the blue one, and insisted on bringing a stuffed elephant. Priya barely had time to brush her own hair or reapply her smudged eyeliner. When they finally left, the wind nipped at their faces and the elevator seemed to crawl down each floor, stopping twice for neighbors to squeeze in. Mrs. Carter was there, wrapped in her olive green coat, nodding politely at Priya. Her eyes were kind, but Priya shrank against the wall, afraid that the older woman would see how frayed she truly was. "Off to the park?" Mrs. Carter asked, voice warm. Priya nodded, suddenly embarrassed by the stains on her sleeve. "Good for you," Mrs. Carter said. "It's not always easy to get out, is it?" Priya shook her head, surprised by the lump in her throat. "Take care, dear," Mrs. Carter said as she stepped out on the lobby floor. "Remember, it's okay not to have all the answers." The words lingered as Priya navigated the stroller down the busy sidewalk. The city was a blur of color and noise. Streetcars rattling by, students huddled over coffee, an elderly couple walking arm in arm. For a moment, she felt like an extra in someone else's life. At the park, the mothers' group clustered near the playground, chatting in easy circles. Nina waved her over with a bright smile, but Priya hesitated at the edge, clutching Arav's hand. The air filled with laughter and the squeak of swings. Priya steeled herself, walking toward the group. Nina greeted her with a hug, her scarf trailing in the wind. "I'm so glad you came," Nina said, her eyes sincere. "Come, sit." Priya perched on the edge of a bench, Arav rushing off to join the other children. She listened as the mothers swapped stories. One joked about her toddler's obsession with dinosaurs, another complained about her husband's cooking. Priya tried to join in, but her words felt heavy, her accent suddenly thick. A mother named Claire turned to her. "How long have you been in Toronto, Priya?" "Almost 2 years," Priya replied, forcing a smile. "Do you work or—" Priya hesitated. "I used to, in India. Marketing. Now, just home." Claire nodded, face polite but distracted. The conversation drifted away, and Priya was left staring at her hands. Nina squeezed her arm. "Ignore them. You're doing amazing." Priya gave a grateful, brittle smile. She wanted to believe it, but her insides churned. The other mothers seemed so sure of themselves, their lives neatly balanced between work and family. She felt like a shadow, trailing behind. Arav ran up, cheeks flushed, asking for a snack. Priya fished an apple from her bag, hands trembling. She caught Nina watching her, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" Nina asked softly. Priya tried to answer, but her throat closed up. She blinked hard, willing the tears away. "I'm just tired," she whispered. "It's always like this. I don't know if I'm enough." A shout interrupted them. Arav, mid-climb on the jungle gym, had lost his footing and was dangling, panicked, from the bars. Priya's heart stopped. She jumped up, racing over as Arav's cry pierced the air. "Mama," he sobbed, eyes wide with fear. Priya reached him in seconds, arms outstretched. "It's okay, Arav. I'm here," she soothed, helping him down. He clung to her, tears soaking her scarf. Other mothers watched, some with sympathy, others with mild annoyance. Priya's cheeks burned. She gathered their things, muttering apologies, and hurried away from the playground, Arav's sobs echoing in her chest. They reached the apartment building just as the rain began. Priya's hands shook as she fumbled with the keys, desperate to get inside, to escape the weight of all those eyes. Upstairs, she set Arav up with cartoons and retreated to the bathroom, locking the door. She sat on the edge of the tub, head in her hands, body racked with silent sobs. The pressure, the loneliness, the constant sense of falling short, it all crashed down, wave after wave. A memory flickered. Her old office in Mumbai, sunlight streaming through glass walls, colleagues laughing over chai. She missed that life. She missed herself. A knock at the door startled her. "Priya?" Rajiv's voice was hesitant, concerned. "Everything okay?" She wiped her eyes, forced her voice steady. "Just a minute." She splashed water on her face and faced the mirror. Her reflection looked back, tired, puffy, but determined. She straightened her shoulders and stepped out. Rajiv stood in the hallway, worry creasing his forehead. "Nina called," he said quietly. She was worried. "Priya, talk to me. Please." Priya wanted to lash out, to tell him how lost she felt, how suffocated by the weight of invisible expectations. But the words tangled in her throat. "I'm struggling, Rajiv," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm failing at everything. At being a mother, a wife, at being myself. I can't do it all." He reached for her hand. "You don't have to do it all. I should help more. I know I've been distracted with work. Maybe we can make some changes. Maybe you could look for a job again if that's what you want." Priya looked at him, tears brimming. "And Arav? We'll figure it out. Together. I just want you to be happy, Priya. I'm sorry I haven't seen how hard it's been." For the first time in months, Priya felt heard. The pressure eased, just a little. She nodded, hope flickering inside her. That evening, after Arav was asleep, Priya sat at the kitchen table, laptop open. She drafted an email to her old boss in Mumbai, fingers trembling with possibility. She looked at Rajiv, who smiled encouragingly from across the room. Before she hit send, a soft knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Carter stood in the hallway, holding a plate of homemade banana bread. "Thought you might like some company," Mrs. Carter said, stepping inside. Priya poured tea and they sat together, the apartment filled with the warm scent of spices and bread. Mrs. Carter shared stories of her own struggles, raising 3 children, moving cities, doubts that crept in during quiet afternoons. "You're not alone, Priya," Mrs. Carter said gently. "We all have days that feel impossible, but they pass. And you find yourself stronger than you ever imagined." Priya smiled, the knots inside her loosening. She realized in that moment she didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed hope and the courage to take the next step. As the city lights twinkled in the night, Priya pressed send on her email. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight begin to lift. The days might still be difficult, but she knew now. She could survive them. And maybe, just maybe, she could start living again. Priya awoke before the alarm. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the leaden weight in her chest, that silent dread of another day repeating itself. The apartment was quiet. Arav's soft breathing drifted from the next room, and even Rajiv's keyboard clatter was absent, his laptop closed for once. The hush felt different today, not empty, but full of a fragile hope waiting to be tested. She sat by the kitchen window, coffee warming her hands. Outside, the city glimmered with the promise of early spring. She let herself pause and breathe, watching rivulets of sunlight chase each other down the glass. The world felt wider, somehow, than the 4 walls she'd been counting like days on a calendar. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nina. "Mother's group is meeting at the park again today. Come, even for a little. We'd love to see you. Priya smiled, genuine this time. She didn't rush to reply. Instead, she thought about the week that had led her here. The breaking point had been both small and seismic. A spilled cup of milk, Arav's tears, Rajiv's distracted apology as he hurried into yet another video call. Priya had locked herself in the bathroom, tears streaming, guilt mounting. The words she'd poured out to Nina later. Sometimes I feel like I've vanished. Like I'm just invisible. Still echoed in her mind. But Nina's response had planted a seed. You're not invisible to me. Or to Arav. Or, I think, even to Mrs. Carter. You need to see yourself, too. Mrs. Carter, with her gentle smile and listening ear, had shared her own confession on the lobby bench. When I first moved here, my husband traveled for work. I barely spoke the language. I felt terribly alone, But one day, I decided to join the book club downstairs. I didn't fit in at first. I kept going anyway. That made all the difference. Today, Priya decided, would be different. Not because the chores would vanish, or Arav would magically behave, or Rajiv would suddenly understand, but because she would choose to show up for herself. She got dressed slowly, choosing a bright scarf she hadn't worn in months. Arav trotted in, clutching his toy truck, his hair a wild halo. "Mama, where are we going?" "To the park, sweetheart." He grinned, and the apartment filled with possibility. The air outside was brisk, but Priya welcomed it. The city's pulse felt almost like encouragement. As she walked, Arav's hand in hers, she noticed things she'd missed. The scent of wet earth, a mural blooming with color on a nearby wall, a busker tuning his guitar. The world was noisy, messy, alive, and she was part of it. At the park, the mothers' group had already gathered. Priya hesitated at the gate, nerves prickling. Nina spotted her and waved, her face lighting up. "Priya, over here!" She took a deep breath and walked over, Arav tugging her arm. The conversation started awkwardly. Small talk about the weather, snacks, children's sleep routines. But then, as the group settled on picnic blankets, Nina nudged her gently. "Priya, tell everyone about your old job. She used to do marketing for big events in Delhi." The other mothers leaned in, genuinely curious. Priya hesitated, then found herself sharing stories about a festival she'd helped organize, the chaos, the creativity, the teamwork. Laughter bubbled up, and the women responded with their own tales of work, of family, of the struggle to balance identities in a new country. A Canadian mother, Maya, said softly, "Sometimes I feel lost too, and I've lived here my whole life. You're not alone." The words settled into Priya's heart. She wasn't alone, not in her feelings, not in her fears. The group was a patchwork of stories, all imperfect, all trying. As Arav played with the other children, Priya felt her shoulders relax. She watched him laugh, saw him fall and pick himself up. Resilience, she realized, wasn't loud. It was just showing up again and again. Later that afternoon, Priya stopped by Mrs. Carter's apartment with a plate of homemade samosas. The older woman welcomed her in, her living room cluttered with books and framed photos. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Carter said, accepting the plate. "How was the group?" Priya smiled. "I almost didn't go, but I'm glad I did. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a start." Mrs. Carter nodded. "That's how you build a new life, one imperfect day at a time." They sat together, sipping tea, sharing silence and stories. For the first time, Priya allowed herself to feel proud, not of a spotless home or a to-do list checked off, but of this small act of courage. That evening, as dusk painted the skyline in lavender and rose, Rajiv closed his laptop and joined her on the balcony. "Arav's asleep?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, he wore himself out at the park." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "I know I haven't really been present. Work's been crazy, but that's no excuse. I want to help more. I want you to be happy here." Priya looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry. She squeezed his hand. "I think I'm learning how to ask for help, Rajiv. From you, from others. Even from myself." He smiled, relief softening his features. "We'll figure it out. Together." As they watched the city lights flicker on, Priya felt a quiet contentment. Her life was not the one she'd imagined. It was messier, lonelier at times, but also richer. She was still discovering who she was: a mother, a wife, a friend, and most importantly, herself. Over the next weeks, Priya kept showing up. She attended more mothers' group meetings, sometimes leading a conversation, sometimes just listening. She started volunteering for small tasks, organizing a potluck, helping a newcomer navigate the community center's forms. She dusted off her old laptop and began drafting a blog. Her words, her stories, her confessions, hoping they might help someone else feel less alone. She made space for herself in small ways. A walk alone on Sunday mornings, a new recipe tried without worrying about perfection, a call home to her parents just to chat, not to report achievements. Arav flourished too, braver on the playground, his words tumbling out in English and Hindi, a bridge between worlds. Rajiv, true to his word, made time for family. Sometimes he cooked dinner, clumsily but with effort. They laughed together more. They argued too, but with honesty, not resentment. One evening, a note from Nina arrived. "Thank you for sharing your story. I thought I was the only one struggling. You make me feel less alone." Priya pinned it to the fridge. Months later, Priya found herself at the community center, standing before a group of new mothers. Some shy, some bold, all a little lost. She cleared her throat. "I moved here from India a year ago. For a long time, I felt invisible. Like my dreams, my old life, didn't matter here. But I learned that we all feel that way sometimes. And that showing up, even on the hard days, is a kind of victory." She paused, searching the faces before her. "You don't have to do it all alone. I'm still learning that too." The group clapped, not out of obligation, but in recognition. As she stepped down, Arav ran up and hugged her knees. Rajiv cheered from the back, phone in hand, recording her speech. Priya laughed, tears prickling her eyes. She felt seen. She felt enough. Now, as she sits by her kitchen window, watching the world awaken, Priya reflects on her journey. The impossible days haven't vanished, but she's survived them, and in doing so, found new strength. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this, someone sitting alone in a kitchen, wondering if they matter, if they're seen, needed to hear that too. If Priya's story touched something in you or reminded you of your own journey, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your story, your survival tips, or even just a hello, because you're not alone either. If you found hope or comfort in this journey, please give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next real-life story. Your support helps us bring more voices, more confessions, and more everyday courage to light. Remember, some days will always feel impossible, but together, we can make surviving them a little bit easier. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community.